And welcome, one and all, to another live night shift. I am your host, Bryson Turner, and with me is the student of the game, Kyle Nash. And might I say, Kyle, why is it that when we play Boise State, we have to get heart attack medication?
Yeah, wow, that's a great parallel. Granted, it's not the same as having a pick six thrown away, but there was certainly a lot of crazy action. And I don't think that's any bit of a hyperbole here, Bryson, by any stretch of the imagination from what we saw tonight. Football gods seem to be favoring blue, but hey, listen, the age-old okay boomer, he puts in air quotes, age-old sophomore, right, baby boomer. Well, I mean, he's not a freshman anymore, but yeah, I mean, listen, tying records, kicking booms, doing the thing. I mean, you got it. It's not every day you have a kicker be the hero of a football game, Bryson Turner, but I think we had one of those tonight.
Oh, we very much did. Colton Boomer, the sophomore, he ended up tying a school record, a 55-yard field goal, the longest field goal in UCF history since Ed O'Brien did it on September 7th, 1985.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's back to the future. That's like the present, the present of Back to the Future that's how long it was when Ed O'Brien made that field goal, and almost right around then, about that. The anniversary of that was a couple days ago.
Great Scott, Bryson!
Indeed, I think it's funny. Colton Boomer, I would argue, last year was kind of like introducing himself, but I feel like today is when Colton Boomer arrived. I almost feel like the okay Boomer thing is now doesn't suit him anymore because okay is not the right adjective to describe that man.
I think it's meant to describe the moment, but not his actual overall prowess. I'll grant you that, Bryson Turner, by any stretch of the imagination. And listen, it's proliferated enough that even the people who are calling the game remotely on FS1, the awkward job that they're doing, still managed to bake that into the broadcast somehow. So that should tell you plenty about how much that's kind of hit the mainstream, so to speak.
Say what you will about the quality of the Fox broadcasters, but I really do feel like that the commentators have an energy about them that I think is one of the minor upsides you get when you watch a game on Fox Sports 1. Of course, the score bug still being what it was, but I will admit I think the commentators at least had a very good, I would say, vibe, or there's an excitement about them that I quite liked, especially in the case of Colton Boomer.
I don't know. My 4-year-old's excited to do the hokey pokey as well. That doesn't mean that they should be presiding that kind of energy in a football game. But what do I know?
I'll tell you what, the fact that he actually set a new career long twice tonight was awesome. And I honestly think he could have gone farther. I really do.
Each of those kicks I feel like could have gone 60. Yeah, I mean, the way that it pounds the back of the net. By the way, credit to Boise's kicker who had the 56-yarder that was actually the longest in this game that truly made it dramatic. Without that, we don't have that 10-9 score to go into the half, even though 256 yards and 9 points, Bryson Turner. What in the actual heck is going on in this football game in the first half? Throughout the half. I mean, and I know that Boise State fans will probably go, well, if Taylor Green played the whole game, they might have won it. Hey, how about getting too short? Well, I'll say this. Kobe Hudson's drop, and it was a drop. By the way, anybody who's blaming John Rice Plumlee in this scenario, you're wrong, and you're just wrong. And watch the video game so you could see to the exact extent that you exist in a state of wrongness. But while Hudson's drop may not have been a sure score, Javon Baker's definitely was. And just there was a whole lot of things I didn't like over and above that in the first half. I don't feel like the players, Bryson, were the only individuals. I wouldn't even say the players were playing nervous, unless you're Madsen, who was the backup quarterback for Boise State. The coaches, I felt, were coaching nervous in this football game. And listen, you know me. I wish I had Eric Lopez and Drew Glukov in here with me so they can verify. I'm not a, hey, the coaches blew it, the play calling's bad kind of guy. I think that's a lazy excuse for analysis. But there's too many things I felt like that were done, air quotes, wrong, to not at least bring it up. But at the end of the day, if you're going to learn and make mistakes, it's nice to do it in a W.
Very true. And to help us break down some of that, we have the third member of our crew, Nick Porcelli, joining us now. Nick, how you feeling? How feeling, man? Did you have to take some heart attack medication?
I nearly had a heart attack, and sorry I'm late. I was too busy taking a victory lap around my apartment.
Hey, well, you do run cross country for one, buddy. Second, you don't. Why are you worried about heart attacks? You're not fat. Leading me to my next point, the other relief that Nick feels, he does not have to jump through a table because he lost a bet on this game. So it's a good time all the way around for Nick.
I said if we came back and win, I'd jump through a table. I have to jump through a table now.
Oh, you pessimistic fool. Well,
I mean, you realize that it almost
I'll be on Barstool in a few weeks.
Definitions of a comeback, because the largest lead Boise State really had throughout this whole game was like 5. No one really got ahead by double digits at all this entire game. That is the barest definition of a comeback there is.
Oh yeah, just.
I
don't know. Like, what just happened? What was that game?
I certainly had let's say quote unquote fun watching this one, because look, first of all, John Rice Plumlee, great job today. Like, for everything that happened in this game, you cannot blame John Rice Plumlee for the stuff that went wrong, except for the fact that he's still having a little bit of trouble defending himself. And that last slide, I mean, the only silver lining about any of that is that we were probably going to sit him next week anyway. So, I mean, I really hope that he is okay. I saw on Twitter that there was a raw video from the stand showing a couple people walking with him off the field. So he's walking, which is good. Hopefully he's all right, that he'll be evaluated and everything. He'll be okay with him. But I mean, he had 2 interceptions, but those are wide receivers interceptions.
No, he did not have 2 interceptions, Bryson. Words matter, dang it. I'm not putting that out.
He was credited with 2 interceptions.
That's my boy. There you go.
Things like that it's the imperfectness of football stat making right there, where the quarterback has to be credited with the interception when in reality it is not his fault whatsoever that happened. And between the interceptions and the drops, and let's also not forget the running back running. Like, I would argue that this is one of the at least glaringly bad offensive performances from the skill positions in wide receiver and running back I've seen in a little bit. Because UCF is normally very, very good in this department. But tonight there was just several key mistakes that really should have made that, if they had gone the other way and had been executed properly, this would have been a runaway.
100%. Yeah.
Without question. And let me build on that a little bit, Bryce. And Nick, go ahead and jump in after this, because I'm sure you'll have something, because there's a lot. First of all the time you guys want to use that slur of skill positions as if we in the middle don't have big skill. The offensive line coming out and doing what they did tonight, they had a fantastic game overall. There's only really 2 or 3 big misses. I think there's only 1 flag I remember, ironically, on Lokai Pioli, which, I mean, you don't expect that, but it happens. You know, they did fantastic. We need to put them in a little bubble off to the side. It took UCF, at least 4 games to play this good up front. This is what we were looking for. This is what we were expecting when Gus Malzahn said to me a few weeks back talking about the biggest increase in depth was on the offensive line and on offense. We saw that tonight. And I don't know if you guys remember on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, or excuse me, the Night Shift podcast that you can find on the blackandgoldbanneret.com. Oh, you don't have the button? Sorry, Bryce.
No. Only Jeff has the button.
Oh, well, wait, get some button. We don't have shirts. We don't have buttons. Come on. No, but joking aside, like that. I said it then that this Boise State team is better up front than you think. And there were a lot of looks I may not have liked defensively. We'll get into that later. But just the way the offensive line came out and handled business. But Bryce, in that evaluation that the skill position struggled tonight, except quarterback, thoroughly accurate from where I sit.
When you look, John Rice Plumlee ends up being UCF's leading rusher. RJ Harvey, out of all the running backs, I would say that RJ had the best day, because I really feel like the biggest mistake he made was when he had to pass the ball and he just became gun shy. And I would argue that that's not RJ Harvey's fault. It's more of the coach's fault for calling that play in the first place. That said, coaches, make sure you to not be gun shy with the ball. So that RJ solid performance there. He got the lone touchdown as well. Great job from him. Johnny Richardson.
Here come Bryson.
62 yards, solid night. I think it's just more along the lines of where you cut. I think that's really seems to be the biggest thing I'm looking at, because certain instances where because for me is you cut where, the players aren't. And so in the end, there could have been some first downs that the team could have gotten that they didn't get. And that ended up just not working out.
I'll say this, Bryson. I'm not going to ever judge a fast guy for when he decides to cut. Who am I? I am way too big to even know what cutting is. And if I try to cut, I might blow my knee out at this age. But what I will say is the mentality of having north and south instead of east and west is something any running back, even a scat guy like Johnny Richardson, must have in short yardage situations. And to your point, Bryson, there's a number of times where he just did one or two extra little moves to dance, and it didn't work out. I know there was a lot of criticism about the movement of or surrounding running plays, pulling guards and things like that. That ain't the problem. I think UCF has enough patience in the backfield to have done that correctly. But when the hole was there and somebody's running up and you're just trying to make the big play when you only need short yards for the first down, live to fight another day, man. Move those chains.
Speaking of live to fight another day, I'm seeing a lot of the concern in the comments for John Rice Plumlee's condition. I'm seeing there's unsubstantiated just talk about him and how he's doing, and let's talk about that actually, because John Rice Plumlee, one thing the commentators just kept on talking about was putting the play in Plumlee's hands, and then the coaches for some reason take it out of his hands, and it didn't work. Because I remember in our group chat, I remember you were talking about I believe it was you that was talking about how the 5-cat, or which I guess we can't call it the 5-cat anymore now because RJ Harvey was the back on one of those plays. But the usage of that just didn't really work out as well this week than it did last week.
So there's a couple things with that, Bryson. First of all, like if for them to come out with the 5-cat, because it was McDonald at that point, to come out with the 5-cat the way you did on 4th and 1, when you had already suffered catastrophe, when you're going to hand Boise State more momentum, when, oh, by the way, people on this panel have noticed Boise's better up front than Kent State by a long spread. I'm not exactly breaking news here, I get that. But to think that you're just going to go out and dominate and then run the ball to left, I don't think Jordan read that play and decided to carry it that way. That's not really his style of run, okay? I think he's going to get cast by Marvel at some point to be the juggernaut, because it'll be cheaper than doing it computer animated for the next Marvel movie that's involved there. In other words, to say he's not inclined to cut to the outside. I think that was written up that way, drawn up that way, and McDonald was doomed and still damn near made it. By the way, almost got the yardage necessary even Then these are, you put the ball in John Rice Plumlee's hands. Listen, somebody incorrectly called me the king of sports cliches the other day on the Night Shift podcast. Bing! But the punchline is they were overusing that and look really stupid doing it. McDonald was actually running the 5-cat correctly, does said juggernaut roll in the middle. Be damned if it doesn't work. I mean.
True, but I will say, look, I was a little mystified when they rolled out the 5-cat to do that 4th down run, because to me, the 5-cat always seems to work better as a red zone play. And we saw that with the touchdown run with RJ Harvey. So why would you call that in a situation where you're in the middle of the field, but you need a 4th down? I understand short yardage. That's what it was built for. Right. But it feels like it's something that is more suited to have less field, around it, not just directly in front of you, but on all sides of you.
Well, okay, so let's build on that, Bryson. First of all, if you have more field, that means it's more likely for the defense to be spread out and sitting back, meaning you won't have linebackers to fill holes unless they take the risk of stepping forward and just assuming you're not going to pass. Okay, so there's some element to that. I would love to see if it's at all possible or plausible. I haven't seen it in practice, so I don't know. But I would love to see a throwing concept, for the people up there who are actual boomers. Think Fridge Perry of that 85 Bears group throwing touchdowns in that formation. To your point, though, those were on the goal line, Bryson. I get that. The other piece is Gus Malzahn, as we've seen many times, is looking for opportunities to get rest for John Rice Plumlee. This is a thing you have to do. He, like everybody else in any sort of, distance of even following a UCF game, is aware that Plumlee's durability is essential for true success for UCF. This, I guess, would be the downside in having so many games to warm up before you play Big 12 opponents. Will Plumlee be warm and ready for the first game against Baylor at the rate we're going? And I'm sure we'll talk and deal in speculation surrounding that here soon enough more. But the punchline, Bryson, is there's the short yardage. I know you get the jumbo package concept being used in short yardage. They thought they could win up front. I have no reason to disagree necessarily, but the play has to be run correctly. It needs to be fast. There needs to be an attack, and it needs to not be where the line is overshifted up front.
Nick, what was your view on all of this and the performance of the rushing attack today?
Overall, I think they did a really good job. I'm a little bit worried because it looked like a couple of our guys got pretty banged up and at one point were limping, and I feel like that's something we need to keep an eye out heading into the next game. Overall, you kind of got it and took the words out of my mouth when you were talking about the Wild Five. I agree with them in theory. Executing, they struggled sometimes. I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to discuss. You, Kyle, pretty much nailed it right there.
It's completely fine. I mean, issues crop up, and you got to deal with them. Speaking of issues,
well, before we jump on, I'd like to. I don't know if you guys talked about this in the first 3 minutes, but you were mentioning everyone in our comments is a little worried about JRP because of that hit he took to the head. Right. I know we kind of talked about this in the group chat, Kyle, but maybe you can explain it better. How was that not a penalty?
Oh, okay. So, and first of all, for clarity, I know the contact happened where it did and when it did. I know these morons on the cast said, "Oh, that's a shoulder-to-shoulder hit." No, but here's the problem. None of that really applies unless a runner is defenseless or giving themselves up at this point. Plumlee decided to slide so late that what they ruled was that you couldn't really tell when he was starting to slide if he was sliding. And listen, I'm making assumptions. I could be wrong. Maybe he wasn't trying to slide. He just stopped and then just decided to flop because, he was poorly balanced by the time he got there. Either could be true. For a guy who plays baseball, we've already made the joke long before this game ever happened that he seems to be very poor at sliding for a guy that does play baseball as a two-sport athlete. For me, I know the helmet-to-helmet hit looked bad, but the defender was not leading with the crown is what they're saying. And even though the guy seemed to deliver an elbow to the head. I need to look at it again to see whether that actually connected. He was leading with his elbow, but that in and of itself isn't a penalty. What really cooked the whole thing there, Nick, is that John Rice waited so long before if he had slided. I mean, this is all split-second decisions by everybody. I'm not being that critical, Right. But I think what it boils down to, you got to give the ref a chance, the players a chance to see that you are giving yourself up in order for that to be dubbed. And I think that's where I live with it. Now, I know we had something out on the Black and Gold Banneret Twitter account official. Oh, it's home cooking. No, you're wrong. I don't know who put it. I don't care who put it. But if they're going to, do it on a thing I'm writing for, I have to tell you, I don't agree. The home cooking was in that tweet. Boom, I said it.
I think they also even explained it a little bit. I think they brought in Dean Blandino to actually kind of explain a little bit also why there was not a penalty on that one. The biggest thing, and this is the one thing that John Rice Plumlee did not do right tonight, is slide. Now, I'll tell you what, defending the quarterback is one of just the hot button issues in college and just football in general, honestly, because there's so many right and wrong ways to do it, or there's never seems to be a perfect way to do it, because sure, you can slide, but then you're ruled down when you start the slide, which means the quarterback could think they made the first down when in reality they slid too soon and they didn't. Then there's the fact that instead you could try to kind of go forward, kind of what it looked like John Rice was kind of doing, maybe not, or maybe he was more of like sitting down, something like that, whatever he was doing. But right. Then, and while sure, it's not going, you know where you're going down, it could end up causing the tackle that we saw, which looked really, really awkward. And it's clear that it shook him up. And that's something we've been saying, like, we don't want John Rice in those situations. There were situations where he ran the ball and didn't go out of bounds. I honestly was kind of okay because it looked like he didn't get hit that hard, but there were a couple of hard hits. The last one, especially, that I was like, oh, please get up, please get up, please get up. And
there was a couple where he did slide in his defense, Bryson, where, he did do that later in the game. There's a couple times where, I mean, listen, if you're going to have a mobile guy, sometimes you're just going to take a big hit. I'd hate to reference Mackenzie Milton here, but things happen, I can reference the NFL as much as we talk about Lamar Demetrius Jackson for the Baltimore Ravens. When he's gotten hurt the most is being crushed in the pocket trying to pass by a poor block than actually running. So, these are things that can just happen to guys like this in that situation who are reliant on physical play. It's the nature of the beast.
Nick, what was your view on that?
So I didn't hear the whole – Dean Blandino did explain it. I didn't hear it because, frankly, and you and I were discussing this in the chat, Kyle, the broadcast was terrible. I literally just turned the volume down and turned up music.
Well, yeah, I don't blame you. I blame Blandino's I think his time doing the stuff with the XFL, I've kind of come to see his point of view, because that part where the XFL lets you watch what they're doing in the officiating booth.
Right. Yeah, I know exactly. Right. Well,
but
I don't know what his opinion was because I didn't hear it. All I'm gonna say is when I was watching the video, to me, it looked like he was starting a slide and then he got hit. So in my mind, I should have been a penalty. But at the same time, I will admit I am biased. I was in the moment and I wanted more yards. So,
no, I mean,
you know more than me, so I'm gonna go with you on this. But in my mind,
but remember, Nick, you're seeing it in slow motion. Yeah, remember, Nick, you're seeing it in replay, and that's the part that makes it tough. To the officials' credit, they actually reviewed the play. It looked like for a minute they were about to go on without even looking at it. So I'll give them that much credit. But after the analysis, what Blandino said is you're looking for big three things, right? Runner defenseless, helmet-to-helmet contact, leading with the crown. You didn't necessarily get clear evidence of all three.
Yeah,
I kind of felt – yeah, go ahead.
It was I agree with you on that. It was borderline. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they did give him the penalty for that. But I think because it was so borderline, it was a classic, not enough evidence, stick with the original call.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. And in his case, he didn't want the yards as much as you did. I understand.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, to go a little bit from the runners of UCF to the runner from Boise State. So last time we played Boise State, you had the one Bronco that really gave people fits and quarterback Hank Bachmeier. This time around, it was their running back, Ashton Jainty, who went 24 rushes, 115 rushing yards, and then 5 receptions for 97 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. I mean, it just seemed like the UCF defense was rarely able to get him that much this time. Just man, what is it with at least one Bronco giving UCF defense fits?
Well, so I'll add this in, Bryson. Like when you look at the stat line here, Giante has 24 for 115, right? And he's got a long of 21. If you take that, what is that off the top of my head? That's 23 carries. If you take the 21-yarder out and you got 93 yards, which isn't a bad performance for a running back, but I feel like a lot of that was UCF getting gashed for big plays on the ground than it was them just getting tore apart. And I feel like there was a lot of instances where they had everything stopped, but then they would come out with a 3-4 look or something. And listen, I'm back to this. It's not usually where I go to criticize the coaches and some of their selections. But from what I can tell, the defensive tackle position is the deepest on UCF's roster. And then you come out with a set against, by the way, who starting quarterback for the Broncos there is Taylon Green, who's like a Viking giant at 6'6", and I forget how big he was, 200 and something a lot. He said jokingly. I don't remember how much he weighed. The punchline is this quarterback is huge. We're talking Ben Roethlisberger size, except more athletic, okay? And you're coming out with a 3-4, and oh, by the way, you have a Viking giant up front. You have only one player from the deepest part of your roster in the game, and the group with the least depth overall for how much they have to do in defensive end. You're having to ask more of them, and then also putting them out of position for speed on the outside because they're trying to attack from closer to the middle rather than being spread out as a 4-3 would have. They took advantage of that, the Broncos. That's all that happened here. You got some gashes here that extended some drives longer than they should have been. But to the defense's credit and to Coach Addison Williams, who I just criticized there, keeping this team at 16 points, considering all that happened in this game and the way the football gods seem to defy UCF at every turn, I can't really get mad at it at the end of the day.
I can't either. To support your calling him a Viking, just to clarify, he is 6'6" and 220, according to his profile.
Okay, so he's not as heavy as I thought, but that's a big dude.
That's still a big guy for a quarterback, especially. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I also wanted to touch on the receivers because we kind of mentioned it earlier, but I don't know if because I feel like the number of drops might not have been like as high to have like a bad one, but I would say that when the moment counted, receivers just got butterfingers. I mean, I don't know what I could say that like even though the drops were small, the quality of the drop was like we could have gotten a first down, or this could easily have gone for a touchdown, and it happened multiple times. There was one
in the red zone, Bryson.
It was
twice. Twice in the zone.
I mean, you said for a first down in the red zone for the first one. The second one was clearly a touchdown. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm adding gravity to what you're telling the people here, buddy.
No, yeah, I know. It's like it said 2 interceptions on John Rice Plumlee when no, it should really be the wide receivers credited with those interceptions, especially that one that was caught in the end zone because it wouldn't have even gotten to the Boise State defender in the first place if the ball haven't been bobbled like it had.
You nailed it on the head. The drops might be small, but what those drops did, it's quality over quantity. What those drops did makes them so much worse compared to if we had dropped 10 times but nothing happened.
And that brings me actually to a big point where I posted a GIF of a character saying I've seen this movie before because we saw the return of the struggling UCF red zone offense that we saw last season. And oh boy, it was agonizing.
Listen, it's easy to go full negative Nancy here, and I almost feel like you guys are retaining the Eric Lopez role in a combined form tonight. But let me throw this in just for clarity. This wasn't a lack of touchdown by way of throwing in Joey Gatewood. This wasn't a lack of touchdown by running predictable plays. This was touchdown by way of the football gods intervening and throwing in into the hands of the other team. I think, listen, the one takeaway you have to give this team, I don't care who you are, is resolve. The fact that they were able to come back, to bounce back, to continue to have those calamities take place in the end zone and still be able to hold on in such a fashion to where they would eventually score a touchdown on the Wildcat, even though everybody said keep the ball in John Rice Plumlee's hands, they got the touchdown necessary in that short field. And listen, Colton Boomer is going to be a candidate for a special teams player of the week for the conference. You would have to think.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
Can we talk about that man? Can we talk about that beautiful?
Talk about that man, Kyle, and I talked about it right at the top. But please, you need your time to gush about him.
Let him get his turn.
Please, I need to talk about that beautiful, beautiful man. 4-for-4, 55 longest, and a clutch field goal. What more can you say? I kind of mean this as a joke, but I'm also completely serious. That man is our goddamn MVP tonight.
I mean,
I don't think there's anything comical about that, Nick.
You know how people are with kickers. There are people out there who don't want kickers in football anymore. But
they're called haters, Nick.
Yeah, kickers deserve love. God dang it, kickers deserve love.
Nick,
Colton Boomer deserves love. He won us that game.
Nick, here's a little trivia question for you. Colton Boomer tied the school record with that 55-yard field goal, the longest field goal in UCF history. What year was that first 55-yard field goal made?
Before you answer that, first, do you think you were alive? And second, for bonus points, what year? I
knew you were going to say that. Oh my God. I'm going to go with no, I wasn't alive, or at the very least, I was like not even 5 yet. That's what I'll guess.
You were definitely not alive.
Okay, so we're going to is this is this in the 90s? Can I ask that?
No, it is not in the 90s.
Oh, geez. 80s? I'll say this, and this clue will be heavy. See what I'm doing there, Bryson? My response to it was, great Scott.
80s. Okay, that's Back to the Future.
Okay, he's catching up.
Yeah.
When did the first one come out? Was it 85?
There you go.
This is Jeff. Get the bell in here. What the heck?
September 7th, 1985. So doing that. So if doing that mental math, I mean, that's what? How many years ago? How many years ago? 2 days ago? Point is, it's many decades.
38-ish.
38. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for demonstrating your math skills as college students, gentlemen. Well done.
Mental math and doing it on paper is completely different, Kyle.
But I am flexing for one who was at one point an engineering major. So there you go.
Okay. Well, here's a question for you. Well, comment. September of 1985 was what? 8 years after Nash graduated?
Here comes Drew's burner account, right? No, I was in kindergarten, and that was on my mom's birthday, by the way.
Oh wow.
Oh wow. Well,
listen, I feel like I have to talk about my mom, because if she were in town, I feel like Colton Boomer should get to meet her. I'm just saying.
Yeah. You sure you want that? Remember the yearbook quote I sent you?
I remember it, but after kicking all the kicks he did tonight, I mean, listen, how could I not? Anyways, this is getting awkward.
This is getting awkward.
I'm not
okay. Now, I will say this:
okay.
if Colton Boomer for some reason is not tonight's MVP, I think that it should also that honor should go to the UCF Knights defense, because
100%.
They were able to, because while the offense was just making mistake after mistake, these guys kept UCF in the game, along with getting a turnover. We actually got one with Corey Thornton getting an interception. But
scoring a touchdown, but we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Talk about the positives.
I mean, he was robbed of setting up points on turnovers. You are correct. That may or may not come up in tonight's edition of Night Class, which will go up to some point tonight or tomorrow on the blackandgoldbanneret.com. Bing!
But if I had to highlight one, though, I would say that the fact that that the 3 tackles for a loss by Tremont Morris Brash, I mean, those plays, I would argue, was probably had some of the biggest impact from a defensive standpoint, just keeping Boise State from getting any headway at all. Just absolutely well done on his part tonight. He got the sack. Malachi Lawrence ended up getting one as well. Just thoughts on Tremont, Kyle?
Tremont Morris Brash, it was good to see him get those key big plays late. And I'll tell you, for again, pointing out in a 4-3, listen, I'm not here to tell you that Tremont is slow for a big dude. That's not what I'm saying. What I am telling you is when he was put far enough outside to where backs running outside would be contained by him, there was an impact. And then when he was far enough outside where he didn't have the risk of being double teamed by an offensive lineman and he went on one with somebody, look, he beat him. I think what he did late was a big part of what was going on. But again, the defensive line in general deserves a ton of credit. And I think the guys behind him, the linebackers and the safeties, were put in a bad position in a lot of places in the run game because of that 3-4 look that would come up. I know they didn't do it the whole game. 4-3 worked more times than it didn't, I felt like, in a lot of situations with the run. But, I mean, speaking as a guy who played offensive line, as is often pointed out on the show here, gentlemen, I always loved it when I looked at a 3-4 because the smaller guys are easier to block. What? I could push people into the backfield and, I don't care how bad – well, Nick, you're a smaller guy. This would be easier. I could probably get Eric Lopez and Jeff Sharon tied together in a 3-legged man contest style to go through a hole. That's how big I can make it as an offensive lineman in the 3-4 because the guys, the nose tackle is either getting double teamed or is getting head up one-on-one. We'll see what happens. You have to double team Lee Hunter and Ricky Barber. Let's be clear. And then that leaves Chaliskar and Brash on the outsides there. And then the best way you defeat it, if they're actually going to get push, which they still did at times because they're talented, you run to the outside where nobody is. I mean, there's a particular play where Nakai Martinez was floored by a block because an offensive lineman was left that open and just put him on his back. And listen, credit to the Broncos for spotting that and running plays like that when they saw the 3-4 or adjusted to the fact that they were doing it. What can I say? Even without their big runner on the night, they still had a lot of quality plays taking advantage of that 3-4 look that the Knights would put out.
Now I just have an image of you tying up Jeff and Eric and just trying to bull rush them.
Hey, I wouldn't bull rush them.
See that?
That would be that short yardage they would score on the 5-cat.
All right.
Who else would you say stuck out for you defensively tonight, Kyle?
I mean, you mentioned the gaining of the turnover. I mean, we see here that Jason Johnson led the team in tackles. I felt like he was kind of all over the field. Listen, getting that push up front, I think for me was the biggest thing. I know there were some times where in the chat, Drew and I were critiquing some of the angles that the players took. But, it happens sometimes. It's okay. At the end of the day, what everybody did to come out and make their presence felt was a big deal. I don't think we mentioned really, I feel like the standout guys already, but Josh Shaliskar is always a beast. I mean, he was second in tackles last week too, but at day's end, I feel like as a unit, there was no one piece that particularly jumped out other than the guys up front in general giving a good push. I mean, we know that Brash got the 3 tackles for loss there. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I still only see I'll put it this way. I still only see 2 sacks on the night, which, to be honest, them getting home that much is an improvement, I'll grant, against a team that's pretty tough up front. But, yeah, I think we've got the big players for the defense on lock here.
So those 2 sacks came at very important points back to back.
Right. So, and for fairness, that's good coaching by UCF to then realize, hey, you got a backup quarterback that's not a Viking giant, instead more Drew Brees sized at 5'10".
He's immortal. He's immortal. Yeah. Fight him.
So I do have a question, another defensive question for you, Kyle. In the group chat, you were talking about how the frustration of the defense lining up in like 3-4 or 4-3. Like, what was the source of that frustration, Kyle?
The source of that, okay. So you're coming out with, what was that, Nick?
It wasn't working at first.
Well, the reason why it wasn't working maybe is, we mentioned on the Night Shift podcast earlier in the week, that Boise's a tough group up front. Their running was working. You just didn't see a lot of it because they had to abandon it so quickly because, playing against Michael Penix Jr. as a Heisman Trophy candidate, kind of tough on him. But over and above that, that 3-4, like I said, it puts the defensive ends further inside so that all they have to do is run to the outside to avoid it. And it also exposes your big guys to be double teamed up front, right? So the toughest thing for any offensive lineman to have to defensive lineman to have to face is when you're double teamed. So, it makes it for an easier block for the offensive lineman up front. And, oh, by the way, we've touched on Taylon Green as a Viking giant. No, he didn't play the whole game, and he got a bit – we found the bell. Holy snap. Okay, cool.
No, that was my phone. That was my phone. That was a text notification. Sorry.
Well, tell your friends to text you whenever I plug something. But with all that in mind,
please text me at this time. Okay.
I'll hit the post. It'll be okay. No, but I think that the main piece over and above all that we were seeing is just getting there. If with a Viking giant at quarterback, and I know he didn't play the whole game and he got nicked up early because of pressure UCF did get, probably on a 4-3 look. Not only are you getting a chance for offensive linemen to do battle against DBs in space, here's a tip. I won that one every time, and I'm not a college caliber. I didn't play in the Power 5, and I still won that one every time. I'm just saying. Now you're going to get that quarterback out in space potentially against a DB at 6'6" and 220. May the force be with you, But again, I'm not the one getting paid heavy amounts of money to coach. This is just what I see.
Fair. No, that's fair. I was looking. I want to look at these comparisons right here because I've seen a lot of comments on Twitter about how this is about whether we're looking on Twitter or looking through our chat about how this was a really ugly win, ugliest win of UCF history. Bad. I wouldn't go that far. I think there has definitely been uglier wins.
The Holy Holler was an uglier win than this one.
I was just gonna say, did you see last season?
Yeah,
exactly. Especially the fact that, because I would argue an ugly win is where every single player had something bad about their performance. Here, I would argue that aside from defending himself, but you can also defending himself. But I would say, there's a different, in my opinion, as far as playing the game. Yeah. John Plumlee and Colton Boomer and the defense had absolutely great performances. The reason this ended up getting ugly is because the wrong players just had some off.
It wasn't even the players, Bryson. It was all the timing. Don't tell me that Hudson didn't make some awesome catches in this game. Javon Baker made some absolutely dynamite catches in this game to set things up for one or the other to make a drop in the red zone. But I think what the fans are, first of all, the fans are reacting to the score. I get it. The score is what determines things. And, it's a win. So obviously UCF fans have to do something to take away from it. That's what they do. That's what fanhood is. Fan is short for fanatic. This is kind of how it works. But I think what needs to be addressed here, to your point, Bryson, it's not so much that it was statistically bad, right? I get 256 yards in the first half. You got 9 points. That beautiful man that Nick refers to. At least
legend. Legend, sir.
After, for what I would just call the football gods forsaking you in the red zone, you're still able to win the football game against an opponent that has what they have at home. Guys, this is a road game. Everybody's going to be forgetting this.
We didn't even need a practice on the Masters Academy blue field to win. It's and Nick, I remember you mentioning this to us earlier that we ended Boise State's like just over
22 straight games where they won the home opener.
Correct.
Last time they did it, just like the field goal record, I also was not alive. 2001.
I was barely.
Now you're just rubbing it in at this point. I mean,
I'm not.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time is the punchline to that. But looking at this comparison here, because Stat Broadcast is a haven of statistical information, the numbers I'm seeing here. I mean, you look at some of the differences between UCF and Boise State in this one, and it's a wonder why this game was not a further margin of victory. But I think we can take a little bit of solace in that. Kyle, you mentioned that it was more of a timing issue, and if anything else, a timing issue seems like something that should be able to be fixed or at least addressed rather quickly. Question?
Well, I don't mean timing in the sense of between the players and just in the time where the mistakes seemed to happen, right? They're just about to score. Oh, it's a turnover. Which I mean, really could be argued could kind of go both ways. Although I don't think it will work out exactly like that. The way those plays happen, I don't think could have happened on another spot on the field. The other defensive backs are just all kind of mushed together because it's a shorter field. So I think that contributed too, right? But you got balls going through the hands of pretty reliable guys that same evening in Baker and Hudson both would make a spectacular catch or a few throughout the game. And by the way, I know it's not Plumlee's most statistically impressive game. We don't need to bring up the interceptions. We've already managed to apologize for him enough on that there, Bryson.
0 picks on the night.
What's that?
He had 0
picks
on the night.
I like how you're doing that, Nick. Well done.
Yeah.
But the yardage and the completion, all of the above there too, may not be his best. And this is not me saying it's bad, by the way. I will take 4 completions for every 6 passes. That is 67% for a guy who's supposed to be an inaccurate passer. It's pretty brilliant, for an athletic guy that's relying on his feet. And also the touch that Plumlee has come to put onto passes. He looked miles better throwing the ball against this team than he did against Kent State, and we know how that ended, okay? It may not be his best statistical performance as a Knight, gentlemen, but I think tonight's performance was his best performance passing that we've seen with him wearing black and gold.
100%. I mean, if you look at our prediction articles, every time I keep saying he needs to prove that he can throw. That is where he struggled last year. Today, he's hitting deep balls. He looked great. The statistics do not show how important he was to this win. Just like the statistics really don't tell what this game is. These statistics don't tell me that this was an ugly game. These statistics tell me how the heck is that the score. That's what I'm taking away from that.
Well, there's plenty of statistics to point to an ugly game. Just look at turnovers and time of possession. You'll see your anomalies, my friend.
I will say that that one catch that Javon Baker made on the sidelines that the commentators called Marvin Harrison Jr.-esque. That one was a really good placement there by John Rice, where just putting it where he knew Javon would be able to get the ball. Only Javon would get the ball. Yes. By the way, so looking through the Twitterverse, we've been kind of looking through there while you guys are talking. John Rice Plumlee has posted to his Twitter X, I refuse to call it X, Twitter account where he has simply posted the letter W. So he has been on his phone in the last little bit to kind of just address Knight Nation, which is good. No updates yet in terms of his condition, but I have to feel like that if he is injured, because I thought for some reason maybe he would have just been concussed because of the hit that he took. But if he's on his phone, that's definitely not it. So if something is wrong, if anything's going on, it probably has something to do with his legs, which is why he was kind of helped off the field there in the dugout. We also got on the Twitterverse. We also got a acknowledgement from Colton Boomer from UCF kickers pass from both Daniel Obarski and the NFL's Matt Prater. Matt Prater tagged Colton Boomer on Twitter, calling him clutch. So UCF is Colton Boomer. Last year he was, I think, the freshman phenom, but this game I think is now really established himself as kind of a member of UCF lore. I really do, because it
was his coming out party, in my opinion. It really was.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen. For by the way, if we're referencing UCF Twitter Kickerverse, Wright came out and had a series of goats with Colton Boomer on Twitter as well. Nobody calls it X, Bryson. Anyway, so no, I think there was a lot going on with that in general too, man. It's good to see them support Boomer. You could call it a coming out party, but I don't think that's a bad thing to do.
Like non-UCF fans, to me, I already knew he was really good because I had to watch it.
Yeah. I think it's more of the fact, in my opinion, that Colton Boomer was a freshman. Because remember, he hadn't had a kick. I think made a kick in competition that was 50 yards or longer until today, which is really the biggest test for him. Freshman
you said his personal best twice, right?
Right. So it's like, okay, he's a good kicker, especially as a freshman last year. He's good, but let's see what he can do as he gets better. And this is where I would say, okay, we have the kicker heritage of, Matt Prater, Matthew Wright, Sean Moffitt. And this is where Colton Boomer really, I think is now made a case for himself to say, hey, I'm the next person in that line of great UCF kickers right there, because he tied the longest field goal in school history. So which has not been done in a while. In fact, I don't think we've actually seen a UCF kicker make a kick over 50 yards in quite a bit, 50 yards or longer, quite a bit. We haven't seen one actually hit one from I would say longer than 52 since 08, according to the book I'm seeing. It sets
the table. He still has 2.8 years to truly show it off.
Yeah,
that is very true, and very true. And the fact that he still has that long, and he's already done it now as a sophomore,
now that is encouraging.
Is really encouraging, absolutely encouraging to see. And today he's getting his just due. I think because I think it's really rare, honestly, that we can really say that the kicker is the MVP and not for one play, because kickers are obviously put in a very high pressure situations all the time in football. And you could say, oh, the kicker's the MVP for just kicking the game winning kick and then a bunch of extra points. But here he got the majority of the points, which is not something you can say very often, very, very often.
He scored 12 out of the 18 points.
Just absolutely nuts from him. Now I'm also seeing throughout the comments now, because we talked about John Rice Plumlee getting injured. I think if there was any time for this to happen, because there's no ideal time for anyone to get injured, but if there ever was one, the fact is that next game is going to be against FCS Villanova. Now it's UCF's turn to have their little FCS cupcake game. And
you mean another one?
I think that's a game where, I feel like that's a game you would want to have sit down John Rice Plumlee anyway for a little bit and have Timmy McClain get a lot more reps. But considering the situation that we might find John Rice Plumlee in right now, do you think we could see Timmy McClain just start that game and be in there the whole time?
That is a good question.
Well, I'll say this. We don't really know anything about his injury, such that it is. I mean,
Yeah,
you come up with a fine theory that if he's looking at his phone, he's not having headaches. But there's a lot more to protocol than that. And I know he was getting checked out on the sideline for that. I'm sure he's going to have his knee looked at. It's nice to hear loosely that he's not walking gingerly, but I like the concept of throwing in Timmy McClain and seeing what you have in that situation where, Nick, you're basically playing against a basketball team, right?
Yeah, essentially. Villanova's time of the sports calendar isn't for a few more months. So, yeah, it's our cupcake game. So I would not be against giving him some reps, especially because I thought that when he came in relief against Kent State, he looked pretty good.
Yeah. What was it? He was a 3 for 5 or in completions. I forget exactly. I don't remember off the top of my head. But while he didn't get as many reps as I would have liked personally, the ones he did have looked pretty good. You're right about that, Nick.
Well, yeah, led 2 touchdown drives. Doesn't have any touchdowns yet. He handed them off, but I would not be surprised if he gets his first UCF touchdown against Villanova next week.
Table seems to be set for that. Well, and I get, that maybe he didn't run the touchdowns in personally, but the thing I want to concentrate on is this isn't like a lot of other guys who were thrown out there and just would break off a big run themselves, like Tommy Castellanos did, who's now seemingly starting for Boston College. So that should tell you everything about their quarterback situation. But, he's actually delivering passes. There's some actual pass talent there. Now granted, it's all different when you're getting thrown out there. And, I would never want to necessarily see the first action in that scenario, should UCF need him, being against a Baylor, an OSU, an Oklahoma, or any of that group. Maybe Houston, that's fine, but we all know that's the last game of the year. But yeah, I think this is over and above John Rice's situation. I think this is a good opportunity to get a bit more polish on these guys. I'm not going full Dylan Gabriel starting ahead of Brandon Wimbush and expecting somebody to be supplanted. That's not what's happening here. I think you're bringing in a guy to be ready to come in if and when probably John Rice Plumlee will need to miss time.
Yes, I remember seeing a comment actually earlier that talked about Plumlee injury being an inevitability. And I think that's the way a backup quarterback really has to kind of live sometimes, is that even if it's not for injury, because obviously injury is not the ideal way to step into a game, there is going to you can kind of treat your career as like, okay, you're going to need me to come in at some point. I have to be ready for when my number gets called. And it gets called, and that's what Mikey Keene had to do. Last year, and that's what Timmy McClain has had to do this year. By the way, Stephen Leonard of 247 Sports tweeted 15 minutes ago that JRP left the stadium on crutches. That is crutches. So we will. There's been other rumors flying around about other injury related things, but Stephen Leonard, friend of the show, has reported left on crutches. So hopefully it's not that serious. But regardless, Timmy McClain, I think, is probably going to end up seeing some time next week. Who knows who else we'll get to see? Like I feel like the Villanova game is a situation where it's almost similar to Kent State, where it's time to now kind of assess what we have. And see what works moving forward. Now, obviously, we don't want to be, Northern Illinois or something like that, because obviously you don't want to treat them lying down. But it's a good opportunity to just see what you have and be able to also, in the event that John Rice Plumlee would have to miss more time, to get Timmy McClain acclimated and ready to go, because after that you start conference play.
Yeah. Precisely the point. I can't agree with it any better than you just put it there, Bryson.
I mean, oh boy, Nick.
Yeah. I can't either. We're playing with the big boys soon.
I mean, I would actually say, because I remember that when I saw the schedule come out, I was thinking to myself, like, this is not exactly the best conference schedule to have going in your first season into the Big 12, because you have Kent State and Villanova, which, put, again, like, because Kent State being what it was, the situation where it ended up being, it just was like, oh man, that's not something that can really test your team. This was the non-conference game where this team would get tested before they go up against the power opponents of the Big 12. And honestly, it's not the way we thought they'd get tested, but they got tested and they prevailed.
Yeah, and I want to ask and to clarify, was that the first UCF game-winning drive that Plumlee has ever led? Because I don't think he did it last year.
Well, he didn't technically lead the Holy Holler. That's accurate.
No, that was Mikey Keene. We had one against Cincinnati. That was also Keene. I think this is the first time that you could call John Rice Plumlee truly clutch in the final moments of the game.
I'd have to look. He was big in the Tulane game, the first one, in that particular instance, too. He had a huge fourth down conversion on a tricky pass involving Isaiah Bowser. So,
I know what you're talking about, but I think we were up at that point. We were just trying to kill the clock.
It wasn't game winning necessarily, no.
Right. I think this is that's what I mean. I think this might have been the first time he had to come from behind or lead a drive. I don't want to give him all the credit because the entire offense just worked perfectly on that final drive, and they all deserve credit for that. But that was the first time I can ever say about. I feel like I can never say about John Rice Plumlee. He really stepped it up and led a very important clutch drive. I'm serious. I saw something out of that man tonight that I don't think I've ever seen, and so far while he's been at UCF.
Well, and we've always seen John Rice Plumlee be a competitor. I don't think you're questioning that. But
100% no. I'm not questioning that.
But I think there was an element and a grace and a calculated, and I hate to use the word that's overused here, but poise is what we're looking at. And just that I think UCF fans should expect a drop-off when Plumlee's not in the game. I get that. And for all the complaining there was about him supplanting Mikey Keene, which was 100% the correct decision for JRP to have started last year. People just haven't figured it out yet. But I think he was going to be, even if Castellanos was still around, even if Mikey Keene didn't transfer, John Rice Plumlee still should have been the starter this season.
100%, and because to be honest, I still like Mikey Keene, even though he's not here. But I don't know if he would have been able to do that tonight. What John Rice Plumlee did tonight.
And I'll build on that this way. Boise also has a quarterback that's reliant on physical play. You saw what happened to them tonight, and because Taylon Green is what he is as a Viking giant who relies on physical play, Mikey Keene with Fresno State might have the opportunity to beat him as well on the blue turf. It'll be a great time for all involved should that happen.
Speaking of other college football programs, let's actually take a quick look because we're going to be facing them in competition soon, and so let's see what else around the Big 12 has been able to do across across the college football world this Saturday.
One Big 12 team did something pretty notable.
True. The Texas Longhorns beat the University of Alabama Crimson Tide 34-24. If that doesn't put the college football world on notice, I don't know what is. Let's fire up Connor Smith, boys. Let's go.
And now every Crimson Tide fan is going to Twitter to complain that the dynasty is dead and that Nick Saban needs to be fired.
Well,
okay, I
mean, I'll put it this way. When you had to take a transfer as late as Alabama did, that already tells you something about your quarterback situation is pretty awful. And Bryce Young is the only reason why they were close and won with the officials' help against Texas last year. So there's that. But I digress.
Yes.
I think the most pressing game was this one here with Utah and Baylor, though, with Utah managing to squeak out the win there. I was watching that game earlier with my family, and I honestly thought Baylor might have had it, and then they didn't.
What happened was,
I mean, they should have come out with a lot of fire. They just lost to Texas State. You want to rebound off of that. They just
I mean, it's like you're right there in the end zone, and then you reach up, and then you drop the ball, and it's intercepted. Too soon? Sorry.
We won. I'm cool with it now.
Yeah. So here's the question for you, because Baylor is now 0-2, which means that no matter what happens, they are going to come into UCF to the bounce house with a losing record. So the question is that do you think that their performance today against the number 12 ranked Utah team, does this reflect poorly on Baylor, or do you think that maybe Texas State was just good?
Week one's a funny thing, Bryson, but I think the element you're going to get, especially as we continue to speculate, as doctors in the same manner that George Clooney was one on ER, right? It's going to be a rough situation for all involved. But Baylor's going to come into town with a losing record. UCF fans are going to be, high on what where presumably would be 3-0 going into that game. I'm not calling a Villanova upset. Call me cocky if you'd like. But I think with all that in mind, if Baylor's coming to town with a losing record, UCF fans will be incredibly disappointed if they lose, regardless of John Rice Plumlee's health situation, such that it is.
We got Oregon going into getting the win over Texas Tech, though it certainly was a close one. Kansas State and BYU put away their respective opponents. Oklahoma keeping it a little close with the SMU Mustangs, who now have a future home in the ACC. What do you make of the Sooners? Because I imagine that's a game a lot of UCF fans have circled now for not just another reason, but the fact is that I have a feeling we're now going to get a lot of boomer jokes that week.
Well, I mean, yeah, one may want a boomer sooner than later. I see what you're saying there, Bryson Turner. But listen, Oklahoma hasn't showed anybody anything yet. I'm not here. I'm not in a big hurry to take off my socks and count the number of things on my toes that I've seen impressive from them. I won't have enough for that. I had to get a sock reference in there somehow. You get that?
Yeah. It's too early in the season. I usually think like week 4 is probably a good time where you can start judging teams. Maybe even week 3 at the earliest. But
what calculated points of view? What are you thinking, Nick? We're speculating.
We ended up getting Cincinnati getting the win over another P5 team in Pittsburgh, and then how about Rice in Houston? Man, I mean, let's to be fair, I mean, you do have JT Daniels, who's on his umpteenth school now, but man,
that's just awesome. Just look at that.
It's fun. Let's just put it this way: it's a fun conference to be a part of. Like, one of the reasons I really love being in the Big 12 is that it's just fun to see some. It's just a very fun conference to play in. Like, you have the rival the matchup that should be rivalry week between Iowa and Iowa State, and Iowa get the win there.
Yeah, they'll certainly be in the top 10 in no time since that happened.
Yeah,
rightly or wrongly.
This guy gets it.
Yeah, because now conference play is getting closer, and I guess really, I mean, it kind of ends up coming back to now what is going to be the issue, because so far I have been scouring the internet for a little while, and so far there doesn't seem to be any updates from the John Rice Plumlee or anyone of post-game press conferences are beginning to kind of come out now. Come out now. A friend of the show, Brandon Helwig, has got that going now. So we could hopefully. So we'll see if we can get some updates from that. But what do you think? What do you think, gentlemen? How do you think we should kind of come away from this one? Because let's put it this way, because now the relief has kind of happened, like that first sense of relief. So now that we've talked through it a lot more, what do you think this game is going to end up doing? End up kind of doing for UCF going forward, other than giving us potential need for heart attack medication?
I mean, well, what form is that heart attack medication coming? If you're referencing John Rice Plumlee, what you essentially did was, yes, Mrs. Lincoln, but other than that part where your husband got shot, how was the show? Okay, let me be clear. Like, anything that we're pulling out of here now is a big shadow cast over it because of the Plumlee injury situation, such that it is. And I'd hate to be playing the Eric Lopez role here right now, but the facts of the case are those, and I don't think anyone will have them in dispute. At this point, gentlemen, not knowing Plumlee's future, and we listen, we're not going to get anything tonight. I'm doubtful we'll get anything tomorrow from the availability from the coordinators. It may not even be Monday until they look John Rice Plumlee over, which means we probably won't get anything from Gus Malzahn that afternoon. So really, for all intents and purposes, we won't know a lot about John Rice Plumlee until Saturday, based on if and when they actually play him. And then how it looks he'll start against Baylor will be a question after that. But the bad part about that is there is so much positive I would actually pull from this game. You handed, at the least, gentlemen, you left 9 points on the table, because we're assuming Boomer would have made all three of those field goals, I'll tell you what, and as much as 21 points on the table. On the table in what would have been a blowout of a game, to where Eric Lopez, with all his doubt, you're playing with the big boys now, you need this one. You would have blown Boise State out and taken advantage of the fact that they didn't have their starting quarterback in the second half to make it a blowout. Instead, you spotted them and then you beat them. I like the resolve. The offensive line played great. I've cited the big performers in the defensive front. My main concerns would have been the defensive secondary, just as they were last week, but now John Rice Plumlee's situation just puts a cloud on all of it.
Well, be careful when you invoke that name, Kyle, because speak of the devil and he shall appear.
Hey!
Somebody mentioned me.
Yes.
I did. I felt like I was playing the role tonight of you bringing some reality to the situation.
Yeah.
His return from the UCF campus, where he called UCF men's soccer's 2-0 victory over Brown. Eric Lopez, ladies and gentlemen.
Number 6 ranked UCF Knights. Let's get that straight, right? We have a long. Want to fill you in. So I just watched Gus Malzahn's press conference. He was not asked about John Rice Plumlee's status because the media that was there was not aware of John Rice Plumlee's injury. So it did not come up in the post game. So if you're expecting to hear Gus talk about the JRP's injury tonight, you're probably not going to get it, at least not right away. Now,
he wouldn't have known anything yet anyway. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys, because, full disclosure, as Bryson mentioned, I called soccer. I listened to the last 5-6 minutes of the football game via the radio with Mark and Gary. When did anybody know when JRP got hurt? Apparently there was a targeting that wasn't called. Mark and Gary were arguing that there should have been a targeting call when he ran late in that last drive, and they didn't call a targeting. I believe the ball got him to about the 30-yard line at the time or something like that. I don't know if you remember what you're talking about, Kyle. But give me your thoughts on those two things there.
Yeah, and we touched on that a bit too. So to kind of restate that, Nick brought up the point about the targeting such that it was, and I think it was actually on the broadcast. No, not only you guys calling the game, but Dean Blandino, who actually got it right here, is the refs are looking for those three things, right? Defenseless player, crown of the helmet, head-to-head contact. While there was a head-to-head element, the defensive player wasn't leaning with the crown of his helmet, and JRP was not clearly defenseless at that point. And I think the biggest problem too, and I think I mentioned this before, is it was a matter of Plumlee possibly, and I'm guessing, because when he starts to move forward, when his legs start to go forward, it's so late in the play, you can't tell if he's sliding or just kind of falling on his butt. I think Blandino made that point as well. And because if you can't tell in a slow motion replay what the intent of a player is, how on earth can you do it as a player, let alone an official from afar, right? Now, I can throw in my own personal concepts of how dirty a play it is for the defender to have his elbow up in the general direction of John Rice Plumlee's head. That's some dirty pool. I'd have had something to say to him as an offensive lineman in the next play. Separate conversation. But as far as the actual call itself, I was not I was not perturbed it was targeting. I was more perturbed to see John Rice Plumlee's leg bend under itself. He probably
So that was the play where he got hurt. That's the play where he got hurt.
It was
actually
his last play. I think it was actually his last play of the day because I think they ran down the clock.
They ran it after that.
I think what you might be seeing is something tantamount to what Travis Kelce suffered this past Thursday or going into this.
That would be best case scenario if that's what it is. Because, I mean, you're playing Villanova next week. You don't need him against Villanova. You need him in 2 weeks. So, ideally.
Give young Bryson Turner credit. He brought that point to the table himself, my friend.
Of course, it already cost me in fantasy football, Travis Kelce's injury, but that's all their story for another show.
So, Eric, I know you're a big UCF historian, so I have a question for you. So, Colton Boomer nailed a 55-yard field goal, tied the school record set by Ed O'Brien. What year did he kick that field goal?
Was that 87?
Nope.
Close.
What was it, 86?
No.
Back it up.
All right, go ahead. Tell me what the year is. Kyle's amused by this trivia game, so just go ahead.
I am, because you're that close, buddy.
He kicked that field goal on September 7th, 1985.
85?
September 7th.
You were that close.
That's not too bad. And I knew his years was play. Well, I'm so disappointed in you, Bryson and Nick. I mean, I described the Colton Boomer. He just took a page out of Chloe Evans, did a walk-off against Boise. I mean, that's what we do against Boise teams, evidently.
I know. It's just
I just praised that man on here. I called him a beautiful, beautiful man.
We talked about the 2021 game. It was that. Then Chloe Evans against Baylor against Boise on the softball field. Now we go on the blue field. And we do that. We played them on 3 different color fields, and it's because softball's brown. There's no grass in the infield.
Wow.
Shot fired. By the way, if you want to
good.
So no matter the color of the field, no matter what the color of the field is, it just seems to be a close.
Finding a way to get a win. That's the moral of the story.
I want to ask you guys a question, and to do so, you need to put your mind and turn yourself into Boise State fans for a second. What is a more heartbreaking loss? Blowing a 21-point lead in 2021 or losing on a last-second field goal at home this year?
Oh, it's the 21-point lead in the bounce house, 100%. Because if I'm a Boise State fan, our backup quarterback had to come in and they hurt Talon. If that didn't happen, by golly, we could have gotten them. That's clearly the line of defense for me.
Bryson? Or that's how you're going to go.
I honestly could take that. I honestly feel like that this one could honestly be worse because at least this one was at home. I mean, if you lose on a last-second field goal at home, that is a very demoralizing loss to have, especially the fact that they robbed you of potentially going to the next home game for free. Because
I think Boise fans are just distraught right now because they're really a has-been program. They're going nowhere. They're the outside looking in. Let me ask you something because obviously, again, I was following it as best as I can. Obviously, I'm on the air calling a soccer match, which is there's no breaks. So unfortunately, I'm pretty much getting updates in my ear, and I'm following the phone. I'm following you guys. I'm following on social media, on the group chat. It sounded like the receivers had a tough night. What I'm listening, is that accurate, Kyle? Were you guys describing here tonight? Oh,
we touched on that. Yeah, I wouldn't say tough nights, but boy, they sure had tough moments in the game. I think this is just you need to call up Jim Carrey. We have a series of unfortunate events. Listen, if those plays go that way anywhere else on the field, it doesn't turn into the disaster we saw. You don't get those picks without a short field like being in the red zone.
Right? Wasn't there a pick? I think I listened to one where he threw a Baker went off his hands and it was picked and it was a touchback, right? Whereas if he holds on to it, it's a touchdown, right?
It happened twice, like what happened in the what Kadarius Toney did in the Lions-Chiefs games. It happened twice. Those were both the picks. Those were perfect throws. Receiver had it.
Yeah.
Boinked off right into the hands of the defender.
Yeah, one of it was a touchback. The other was just bad field position for Boise. So take what you will.
Well, let me ask you then: have we overhyped this receiving core too much? They're good? I mean, is it? Are you just saying this is just an off night? It's an off moments there. Don't overreact to it.
I don't even know if I'd call it an off night. We were talking about this earlier. Those were like the only 2 drops. It's just they were very, very costly. So I don't know if I'd say overhyping, because those same receivers, they were dropping that, but then they're making a catch where they're like have 1 foot down and their body's halfway bent over the out of bound line they're making incredible catches. So I don't even know if I'd say they had an off night. I just think they just made 2 very costly mistakes.
Okay, but yeah, that's unfortunate. Although, if I remember correctly, Kyle, you can tell me if I'm wrong. That sounds like the same story in the game 2 years ago? Wasn't like one of Dylan Gabriel's pick 6 against Boise off a receiver's hit, right? Deflection.
No. He threw it right to the guy.
That was the one in the end zone, right. But I thought there was another one that was deflector. Maybe I'm thinking Louisville. Maybe I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I was saying that in the chat. This game reminds me a lot of the Louisville. The only difference, and I said it earlier, John Rice Plumlee last against Louisville had a chance to lead a game-winning drive, and he failed. Not this time.
How should we feel leaving this game, guys? How should we leave? Because obviously there's good, bad, and right. There's all. You did win the game, but obviously Plumlee's injury is a concern. Like I said, I don't think we're going to get any updates tonight. We may not. And Kyle, you know this as well as anybody. We may not get a full update on Monday, depending on what the injury is.
I said earlier, we're not going to know a whole lot until Saturday, honestly, to see what happens.
I think.
So how do you?
I don't think we're gonna. I honestly think that this game is going to kind of evolve with time. Once we learn what Plumlee's injury is, if it was a injury that does not require him to miss a lot of time, then I think we feel a little better about this game in terms of that. If it's a lot of time, then we're thinking like, oh man, it happened again. And
by the way, let's settle down on all the chatter about, hey, look, he's wearing this and he's wearing a braid. And listen, they're about to go on a long flight, I believe, in the morning to Boise. So they're going to take every precaution, regardless of what the injury is. Of course, they're going to put all the stuff around his foot. So let's not play this amateur doctor right now. Oh, look, he's wearing this and he's doing that. Let's just let the people that know what they're doing address it. They'll take care of him, and let's hope for the best.
Unless he graduated medical school. Shut up.
That's all. I'm seeing this a lot. I've been following the chat, and there's a lot. He's wearing this, and he's settle down. Let's relax. Kyle and I have covered so many post games. How many times have we seen athletes leave a locker room with all this stuff in their bodies? You're like, oh, they're not, and then the next thing you know, they're ready to go the next day or the next week. So let's not get all overhyped as we tend to do on social media with injuries.
Eric, I have a question for you. Did you listen to just Gus's post game, or did you listen to the players as well?
I just listened to some of Gus, some of the highlight stuff, not all of it, but I did listen to some of Gus.
So you talked about what Gus didn't say, which was about John Rice Plumlee. But can you talk about a little bit about what he did say?
Well, I think he obviously feels the coaching staff could do some better jobs on certain things. I don't know, Kyle, you're shaking your head. You know what he's talking about?
I absolutely do. Yeah, there were some decisions that were made at questionable times. There were some certain strategies. I don't know that it came up in particular to Addison Wilson going to the 3-4 or the 4-3 at particular times. I don't know if that's referencing.
There was a fourth down call that was discussed early. I guess they went for it, didn't get it. Is that?
And that would have been with the 5-cat, and we discussed that. It wasn't so much the play call itself as it was kind of the direction it was run. Right? If you have Jordan McDonald, who is the wrecking ball that he is. You have him attacking the middle. You don't have him going to the outside, especially towards an overshifted part of the line that Boise was sporting at that particular moment. So, and that's another one of those revisionist things that it would be really easy to say it was an outright bad play call. There was a lot of it that was wrong. But my main criticism of it was, and we talked about it on Night Shift earlier in the week, Elo, this Boise State group up front's better than I think they were necessarily prepared for. I think they're opting to experiment to see if the 5-cat would be successful against Boise in a moment where you could regain momentum after handing it to them in the first place, after the Hudson drop, which was the first red zone turnover, right? That may not have been the place to experiment. Also, the RJ Harvey situation where he was in a running back pass scenario. on a third down, completely makeable, too much trickeration. You had momentum. You could have been running people over. Some of that I think was a fair criticism. And honestly, there's an element of me, not necessarily as somebody who's following UCF, but as somebody who just hates seeing missed opportunities in general. I'm somewhat relieved to hear Gus address it personally.
Can't forget about that weird 2-point conversion call that they made. That
wasn't. I don't think they was asked about that. He was upset. He felt that was targeting on JRP. He was very upset that was not called. That was also that was mentioned in the press conference.
It looked bad in fast motion. I get frustration there. I think it's a situation where JRP needed to have given. It's easy for me to say I have Captain Hindsight flying with me, but he I feel like that's one where he decided to slide too late. Is the biggest problem.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's fair.
He slid a little bit earlier, but he would have gone in it. But also, he could have maybe gone in it. It was ticky-tack. It was close.
So, Eric, this is a very interesting thing that I'm thinking about. So, considering the mistakes occurred in the red zone, do you think that there is still some solace in the fact that this offense really can seem to move the ball? Because I feel like that the red zone struggles that this offense had today mostly came from those little moments.
Well, but again, first of all, we don't know what Plumlee's status is, and Kyle, the question is, what was your thoughts on the line? Are you sold? You still got questions on both on the line? Because that's the other thing, right? Like, you're going to face better fronts moving forward. With respect to Boise State, you're going to face better fronts in the Big 12. So I guess really that's the question, Kyle, is how did this team match up front?
Well, and to your point, Boise State is playing against a what is supposed to be one of the tougher Pac-12 teams last week, and up front wasn't the issue. So it's not that this group is bad in the trenches. And Elo, I said it earlier, there were only what I thought were 3 particularly bad snaps by the offensive line. Unfortunately, 2 of them on third down. That's life, but more of that bad timing stuff, I guess. But no, overall, I was enthused by what the O-line did. Only 2 penalties that I can recall off the top of my head. You don't see many penalties from 7-7, but Lokahe Paoli, it happens, Overall, I'll put it this way, Elo. How long did it take UCF to get right up front to the point that they did, even when we were able to pick them apart later in the season at times, right? Tylen Grable is not what he was last year, for example, at the left tackle position, right? It took them 4 to 6 weeks last year to truly get tough, right? We talk about their coming out party being the Cincinnati game last year. We know how deep in the season. That's October. This group is already more gelled than that group with 1 week difference in action.
Well, that's encouraging. That's encouraging to me. And like I said, we'll see what happens with Plumlee. But here's what I will say. If Timmy McClain is called to duty, it's not like the offense is going to drastically change. It's not like you're going from one guy to a completely different style. And I spoke to Darren Hinshaw at Media Day, and they have a package for him. He's gotten better and better. I'm not saying that's ideal, but he has experience. He's played in big games. He's got, so if you have to go to Timmy McClain, I like the fact that you don't have to drastically change your offense, unlike the kid from Fresno who's playing on FS5 or wherever Fresno State games air. So, or the kid,
That's fine. The Cinco, yes.
Yeah. Everybody, I know that name's going to be. I'm sure that name's been brought up, but it is what it is. Hopefully, But Timmy McClain, that's the opportunity he might be presented with this upcoming week, next week against Villanova. And the fact, Kyle, that you are encouraged by the offensive line also gives me optimism for whether it's JRP coming back or Timmy McClain being successful. Because as you know, if the line is solid, you got a chance. And this team is going to run the ball. They're going to run first, pass second. That's who they are.
Well, I'll put it this way. I don't necessarily, when you say first, I think you mean to say they're going to run more. I didn't, for all the talk we did, Bryson, I did not check the number of plays of one to the other. But I mean, 41-24, I mean, that's not necessarily balanced. But I'll say this, Elo, if you come out and you're stacking the box, John Rice Plumlee's done enough to where I feel confident he can put it over the top on you with some good touch.
All right. I can see that. Eric, I did actually want to ask you this, by the way, because this win of UCF 18-16 against Boise State means that UCF Sports has now won every single game they've played today, and you were at the other two. We talked about how you were at the men's soccer matchup where number 6 ranked UCF beat Brown 2-0, but you also were at a very eventful volleyball matchup before that, weren't you?
Well, yeah, today was survival Saturday for UCF teams, evidently. Find a way to win. May not have been pretty, but they won, and that's the story, right? Football wins ugly. Volleyball had to come back from a 2-1 deficit to beat North Texas in 5 sets. UCF soccer is scoreless at halftime with Brown. They get 2 goals in the second half to win. By the way, you can catch all the post-game press conferences exclusively on blackandgoldbanneret.com on our YouTube page. We'll have those videos on the recaps for Nightcap, and some of those interviews actually might be on the next podcast. But survival Saturday, right? Isn't that the way to describe this day, Kyle? Survival Saturday. They found a way to win the game, and by the way, for people that are thinking that we're are you being too nice to Plumlee? Kyle, you've been a skeptic of Plumlee.
Sure. As a passer, 100%.
Right. And so that's I just want to go back to that statement you just made. That is a significant statement coming from you that you feel much more confident in what John Rice can do now over the air based on what you've seen here in the 2 games.
Well, yeah. And I mean, if you go and listen to the Night Shift podcast, on whatever podcatcher you're using, bing, you'll hear me reference, we saw elements of that touch against Kent State. There was an element of, in the interceptions he threw, there was an element of, F it, one could argue that this is another instance of UCF playing with its food a bit too much. But this meal was a bit more spicy, perhaps. That can certainly be one element to take. But yeah, John Rice Plumlee is making better decisions, has more touch on his passes. There's definitely an element of, if he puts a ball out, it's only where his guy can get it. And granted, you're seeing more of that, I would argue, because he's better protected at this point in the season by a long shot.
By the way, I've seen now photos, UCF players leaving the stadium with some potatoes in their hands with a smile on their face. There you go. There you go.
I really hope that we're not going. This isn't another Clemson situation, and Boise fans are going to complain about it or something.
I'm just telling you what I'm from what I'm seeing with photos and videos there. Gus, by the way, did say he was very proud of the team with facing the adversity they did tonight. He felt that was something he expected. He thinks that'll pay off in the long run.
That's my biggest thing. Just if there's one of the big positives, it's that this team showed its resolve, and that's something that as a UCF fan, I'm damn proud to see. That's one of my choices.
No, that's a good take. By the way, Bryson, would you say earlier you're worried about Boise State fans possibly being blue?
No, they're not sad. Blue's not sad, Kyle. If anything, they'd be red. And that's a totally different school. And that's a totally
angry.
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody said anything about Eastern Kentucky. The blues is a whole music style. How are you not getting this?
You're talking about the music style.
Yeah, they have the blues. Come on.
That's more of a New Orleans connection, though. When you talk about blue and Boise, you're talking about the color.
Plus, feeling blue does mean sad. I think that's what he thought you meant.
I'm sorry, Kyle. I think that might.
Why would Boise State fans not be sad? They had an opportunity to win this football game. Listen, you're going to need to plead the Taylor Swift offense. It's you. Hi, you're the problem. It's you.
Are you a Swiftie? Are you a Swiftie? I did not know that.
Look at me. Do I look like a Swiftie?
I don't know.
He definitely does not. Let me ask you all, gentlemen, give me your thoughts on the defense. I haven't heard much defensive talk. talk about the defense. Gus, by the way, mentioned there was that play where the quarterback for Boise broke like their pursuit and had a big play. He said give them credit. They were trying to bring pressure and things like that. But your overall thoughts defensively with this team?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it a bit earlier. It's that element again. I feel like the only time the defensive front truly faltered was when they came out with that 3-4 look. Not that they didn't have some success with it at times, but overall it worked less than it, it failed more than it worked. I felt like, but the defense, to their credit, I mean, if you could walk away giving up 16 points in a game where your offense turned the ball over twice, 3 times you could argue with a turnover on downs. When you're spotting the other team at least a dozen, or 9, anywhere from 9 to 21 points, with missed opportunities, where you're getting 0 instead of at least a little bit of intervention from Colton Boomer, you got to feel good about that. Being able to walk away with the win. I did thoroughly enjoy what the defensive ends did tonight, because having to go to 3-4 means you're being overworked. Lawrence, of course, had a pretty good key moment in the game later as well, so credit to him. But yeah, it's the defensive front I was thoroughly impressed with. Corey Thornton got a turnover. That's always positive. So that's 2 straight games with the turnover. I think it's been a minute since UCF's done that.
It's definitely been a minute.
Yeah, so with all that in mind, unfortunately, UCF has as many turnovers in takeaways this year as receivers do in giveaways in this game.
By the way, Gus was not happy with his discipline. He felt like Boise, I guess defensive line kind of let their offensive jumped a couple times, plays there with motion. He didn't think they were disciplined as far as UCF with their motion game and all that. I don't know if you noticed anything there, Kyle, but that was something he also.
There was a penalty or 2, but I think that's a coach. Listen, when you win, you should treat your team like they lost. When you lose, you treat your team like they won, because you're either trying to keep a team grounded when they win a relatively big game, like Boise is, right? To your statement earlier, this is the big boys now. UCF has to win this game against the G5 team, all that. So he's keeping them grounded, and I think that's a good thing to do here.
Well, and wouldn't you agree, a coach's dream in a way is winning ugly, because you win, but now you have so much tape that you could show your players, look at, we need to fix this, we got to improve that, right? Isn't that, the coaches love that. They don't admit it, but there's a part of them that enjoys that nitpicking, and they're going to, and I think that's the case here as well. I think there's a lot of things they want to clean up and they could do better, but the most important thing is they got the win.
Yeah, it might be more heart palpitations during the game. But, afterward, and I think it's actually Johnny Dawkins. I mostly learned that lesson best from. But, yeah, it's always nice to learn a lesson in a win, no question.
And I think that's the story with all 3 teams tonight, Bryson. Both men's soccer, volleyball, didn't play clean, found a way to win, got things to work on, and they can move on to the next step, which is for both soccer teams will be conference play. Men's soccer will be in the Sun Belt, and then volleyball will be in Purdue next weekend. Football plays Villanova. No Jay Wright, though, right, Kyle? No Jay Wright in the sidelines. Oh, don't worry. I got more material. I'm warming. It's just a warm-up.
Listen, I'm just surprised you didn't use the S word to describe that game.
Well, we have a
Villanova team, a team that somebody was floated as a possible Big 12 ad at some point.
I think it would be a great basketball get. I'm just saying. Go ahead,
we have more material in the comments section from 32, where it says, so can we still be mad at Gus for making Colton's only missed field goal that's 60-plus yarder last year?
Well, that was a miscue, though. That was a miscommunication, right? They weren't supposed to snap that ball. I remember that because he addressed that in the post. They were not supposed to snap that ball. That was a miscommunication.
Man, how ironic is that? Not ironic, but how funny is it that the right now the only miss of Colton Boomer's entire career right to this point has come on a miscommunication? By the way, Eric, I know that you kind of came in and you only heard Boomer's kick on the radio, but I imagine that Mark has kind of hyped Boomer up for that moment. What were your thoughts about his performance?
Well, let's talk about. We're going to focus obviously on Colton Boomer, but Mark James made a great point, and Bryson, you know this. Kyle, remember the placeholder, brand new, Mitch McCarthy, young Australian. New snapper. We always focus on the kick, right? And obviously that's the important thing. You got to get the kick, but you got a new holder and a snapper on the road, and that was all good execution. Remember, McCarthy just came over Australia. He's learning the sport. So let's give them credit for that. Colton Boomer was interviewed in the postgame, and one of the players jumped them in behind him. Boomer! So, yeah, that was allowed. There was a lot of Boomer chants in the postgame there. But huge kick. I mean, I'm trying to think. It's probably it's one of the bigger kicks in a long time. Obviously, when you think of UCF football history, the biggest kick, I would argue, is Javier Borrelli against Alabama to beat the Crimson Tide in 2000. Because that was the first marquee win for the program. But I was trying to think. We haven't had many buzzer beater field goal wins like this.
I mean, would you count Prater shanking it in the Honolulu Bowl there?
Well, that's why. Like, I was listening to Bryson mentioning Matt Prater. Like, can we not bring him up, please? We don't need. Like, he would have shanked this kick. With all due respect, he would have missed tonight. All right, and I know this because he missed an extra point in overtime against Ohio. They still haven't gotten over on homecoming, where they could have had their best chance to win that game that year. So I don't know what happened.
How many games did he win Tim Tebow in Denver? I'm just saying.
It's crazy. That's one of the most bizarre careers that I can remember.
He's a NFL kicker. I mean,
I know.
I know. The record for longest field goal. I think he still holds the record for most 50-plus yarders.
Good for him. No, he didn't make it when he was at UCF.
And he showed love to Colton tonight, man. Come on.
But listen, the Noller is not that interested in your analysis in that point there. So
I was trying to think, and I mean, if the audience can think of some, and the last time UCF won on a walk-off field goal. I mean, we got to go back, right? Like, it's not happened often. Usually UCF has going away, or they win by a touchdown.
I mean, it's Wright or later, right? You feel like Wright had to have had one at some point, I think.
Well, he nailed a big one, I want to say, against Memphis that in 2018 that kept the streak going, but that wasn't a buzzer beater. That was
it was not a buzzer beater. That's true.
But I remember this. He made a big field goal in the weather right before halftime. That was big. Remember that? They changed that momentum of that football.
It was a one-point game. Of course, it was big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
as far as
it's a big kick in a long time.
I will say that I think looking at Colton, because this is very interesting to me, and is I feel like that he might be the first booming kicker. UCF might have seen it.
See what you've done, Kyle. Yeah, that's what you've done, Kyle. He's gotten that. You've influenced the young man. I hope you've influenced the youth, Kyle.
Who started this?
So is that because I'm looking at the record book, and granted this is from 2021, but I feel like that in 22 there wasn't really a lot of long field goals to come by that year. We have not seen like 50-yard field or over 50-yard field goals in UCF since like the late aughts. Darren Daly kicked a 54-yarder. In 2008, Michael Torres hit a 51-yarder in 06, but Boomer he hit a 50 and a 55-yarder tonight, and it looked like he could have easily kicked it farther than that.
Could have been 60. Yeah.
Let me ask you. So let me ask you this, Kyle, because you cover the NFL. Do you think he has an NFL leg?
I'll put it this way. I feel like it would be a scenario where they would have to keep another roster spot for the actual place kicking. That's got to get better. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that he has the distance to do that. He really does. Like I am very intrigued to see, because who knows because obviously the offense has to put him in positions like this, but the fact that
let's hope we don't have to use him this much every game, because then we're gonna have because otherwise it's gonna be a longer year. You're not gonna get away with this many field goals in the Big 12. Although certainly Baylor's off to a slow start. They lost to Utah. Then Houston tonight lost to Rice.
Well, Rice has JT Daniels going to his umpteenth school. Like,
I don't care I know the Houston alumni. They're not going to be happy with that with Data Hogerson. Good luck.
I'm happy.
They were already angry with him there, Elo.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so. But hey, the good news for the Big 12, Texas won a big game tonight, and Colorado primetime 2-0. That's what you got to look forward to next year to the Big 12. But
Dion slept in his office apparently.
I mean, it's probably a nice office. Keep in mind, there's other Big 12 teams, my point, they're having more issues. Houston and Baylor, obviously, among them on that one. Texas Tech lost to Oregon. I watched that in Lubbock, too. They're 0-2. So
it's such a tough place to play, Elo.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've been told. So look, that's why this Plumlee news will be interesting. I think this team can win some games in the Big 12. I said my prediction the preseason was 8 to 9 wins was very doable. Now, obviously, the Plumlee injury could change that, but I think the Big 12 is kind of there's not a bad team in the league, but there's not a great team. Now, Texas made a statement tonight. We'll see what that means moving forward. The Texas's history is they usually follow up a big win with a clunker down the road. Oklahoma beat SMU. We don't know what that means. Kansas State obviously hasn't been tested yet, but I think there's some opportunities in the Big 12. Kansas, with their quarterback, if he can stay healthy, maybe that's the team that could cause some trouble. But I think it's there for UCF with the defense, the running game. I think they can win some games, but obviously the injury to Plumlee could obviously dictate some of this.
Well, I mean, if Texas is back, which I know all the Texas people are probably chanting the heck now, but I
know Matthew McConaughey he was flipping out on the sidelines there.
If there is if there is an infinitesimal chance that Texas is actually back, because they always say it and they never are, but they actually are true this time, and the boy who cried wolf is actually right. The fact that they do not have Texas on this regular season schedule is a really good sign if that is the case. And it's not going to be until the championship game that type of situation would have to be in. But looking through this, yeah, I agree. 8 to 9 wins, given the Big 12, like the caliber of Big 12 teams we've been seeing through these first 2 weeks, I feel a lot more optimistic about how many wins we could get in the Big 12 than I did a few weeks ago. Like, I thought that we honestly would be good for bowl eligibility. Like, I was just like, bowl eligibility is fine, but this is like, again, I wouldn't want to raise expectations too high, obviously, because again, these are new conference situations, and you obviously have to go to Lawrence, you have to go to Norman, you have to go to Lubbock, and those all present their own challenges. But and Manhattan, but
No, I agree. But what I'm saying is it's not impossible. It's not like this impossible thing like, oh, my God, they can't have a chance to win there. They have a chance to win because if the line's good enough, if they're physical enough, I don't think the Big 12 is a physical league. I think UCF could have that advantage on some of these teams, and that's why I was curious to see how the line would play and would they bring that on the road to Boise State? Because, again, that's going to be the key here the rest of the way.
Listen, I'll give you this, Elo. You brought up Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffalo earlier. I'll tell you that UCF had a better day up front than that line did. I can tell you that. Nebraska.
Oh, you're right.
Shedeur Sanders early. And then they came out and blew it open in the second half because they finally figured it out. But yeah, no.
You're right. Colorado, we'll see how long that lasts. They're trying to win shootouts. Nebraska, guys, I hate to break it to Nebraska fans. Scott Frost wasn't the problem. Maybe you guys are the problem. Just saying. Anyway, because Matt Rule can coach. No, Matt Rule can coach. So if he can't win there, I don't want to hear it. That's it. You're done. You're done, Nebraska. You're a volleyball school from now on. Congratulations.
You're Rutgers too.
Who knows? But, I think you're right. There are chances, like, to me, that UCF can win some games being physical. And I think Gus gets that. Don't you get a set and just listening to Gus and Herb Hancock? I think they know that. Gus knows that from his time in the SEC. That's how you win, is up front. That's why the SEC is always separating themselves at the end of the day, is because of up front. And one of the reasons why Alabama is no longer Alabama is they're not as good up front. If you saw I saw Texas handle that.
Yeah, Texas is just really they're SEC good up front. So
they do. They've recruited very well. Right.
Let's not act like there's not a lot there. But 100%. I think they're having quarterback problems as well, as evidenced by a late offseason transfer. But that's a whole other.
I agree with that 100% with that. I think that was very good. They're going to miss Bryce Young. I mean, that's the bottom.
Oh yeah.
So, Eric, I do want to ask then, because so let's just say for whatever, regardless of Plumlee's status for next weekend, what are you looking to see from this team now going to Villanova? Is this just kind of Kent State 2?
Well, I think it depends on the quarterback situation. Now, they should, again, regardless of who the quarterback is, they should beat Villanova. But I will say, if Plumlee's out and Timmy McClain plays, that does add some intrigue into this game, because I think those are important reps for Mr. Timmy McClain. And let me throw this out here to you all, gentlemen. Let's just say Plumlee's out. We're speculating it. We don't know. But let's just say Plumlee's out. Timmy McClain starts, plays. Do you want to see Dylan Risk get some snaps as well? And obviously the game will dictate some of that. But I think that's something that Gus and Darren Hinshaw and company will have to talk about. If, depending on what the Plumlee injury is, yes, you have Timmy McClain starting, but who's the backup quarterback? Who do you trust to back up Timmy McClain? Is that Dylan Risk? Is Dylan Risk a guy you're willing to not redshirt? Now, granted, you could play him in this game and still redshirt him, so I don't want to – yeah, but – I think those are things that UCF staff have to talk about, because we just went through this last year, gentlemen, with injuries with the quarterback in the back and forth and redshirting and this or that. And as Darren Hinshaw alluded to it on media day, UCF ended up having to use 3 quarterbacks at the end of the year.
Well,
so learn from history. I know it's unique. I know circumstances was
not
bizarre.
Not even that, Elo. I think it's not just uniqueness too, but we haven't seen. We don't. I'll put it this way. We don't know how much risk we have in Dylan, but we knew Castellanos wasn't ready going into that bowl game, period.
Right. 100%. And I think this is one of the things that Darren Hinshaw has alluded to, that every quarterback on this roster would be ready to play when their number's called, because as you saw last year, your number could get called at any moment. He says they all have packages and all that. We're about to find that out, perhaps, starting next week, if we see Timmy McClain next week, which against Villanova, which I think my guess is we probably will. Whether he starts or not is irrelevant. I think we're going to see Timmy McClain in some role next week. I think it's 2018 with Mackenzie Milton and DJ Mack in East Carolina.
I think with Dylan, let's not forget that this is coming off a season where the coaching staff completely bungled the red shirt of Tommy Castellanos. So I really don't think they're that they want to make sure they do not do that again, I think. And so I think now maybe this is different in the Big 12, because, you have a lot of, because you have the situations where with the opponents we're seeing, the only way that Rizek would get more playing time after that is due to injuries. But I think it will be interesting to see if Rizek is called up, because if he is, then maybe they're under the assumption that Rizek might not be needed later in the season. Though,
you have to get quarterbacks ready to play, because if Timmy McClain has to start, there's no guarantee he's going to last the whole year. So you have to have somebody behind, whether it's the kid from Charlotte or whether it's Dylan. That's what the staff has to decide in what direction they want to go with. You can't assume that your next guy is just going to play the full season. You hope that's the case. But as Darren Hinshaw mentioned to me on media day, you have to have the entire quarterback room ready to play. And Kyle, you know this. I've been very open and public about this. I don't believe that was the case last year with the quarterback room, in my opinion.
We said that about Castellanos, but I think the thing that here's what determines, in my opinion, if where we see if your quote of Darren Hinshaw, if that's just coach speak or he's real on that, is if we see that. I mentioned this earlier, and I think if we're talking about the prospect of risk playing in or being expected to play, he has to show up against Villanova, because no quarterback on this roster who's not John Rice Plumlee, their first action should not be against a Big 12 team if you can avoid it.
I actually will say this, as much as I like to have fun at these type of games and mock it, as has been alluded to, in a way, based on what could have, again, we don't know the Plumlee situation, this Villanova game might come at the right time.
Yeah, and I think
Right time. And I think that's where, if you're going to play these games, this is why. And you're right. Dylan needs to play in that game. I think Timmy plays. Well, and maybe, who knows? And they got to get off to a good start. So we will see. By the way, since our roles have reversed, I feel like I need to sign off. Because, when Kyle's at the stadium, he likes to have his signature leave. So I feel like I'm gonna sign off myself here and let you guys wrap up. You've done a fantastic job with the show. I just wanted to make a cameo. Play the Kyle role a little bit and help you out with what Gus had to say. So I will sign off. Check out the YouTube channel for all post-game coverage of the soccer and volleyball and all UCF sports. We'll probably have coverage all week from Monday pressers and everything like that. So we'll keep you updated on the Plumlee situation. But I will not steal Kyle's, signature finish. So I'll just use my own line. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Top guy out.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Eric, taking some time after your busy day to come over. But yeah, like you said, I think this is a good point to kind of give our final thoughts. Nick, what are your final thoughts on tonight? How would you think UCF fans will end up kind of like really remembering this night, and how should we kind of like now look forward to Villanova and beyond, regardless of what we will hear about one John Rice Plumlee?
This game was stressful. I'm glad it's over. I saw some mistakes that we need to correct. Hopefully the receivers don't drop balls in the end zone anymore. But this team has resolve. This defense can make up for offensive mistakes. There's a lot to look forward to, and I'm just glad that we have an easier team coming up next week at home. And before which I have to jump through a table at tailgating. So
yes. Oh my God. Oh man. Someone film that. Whoever.
I have to find a table.
For somebody.
You're making you pay for the table? Well, I mean, you did lose, so.
I will fill. So whoever is at tailgate next week.
Crack journalist Bryson Turner will be on scene to get the table job.
Unleash my inner macho man Randy Savage and hit that elbow drop from the top.
More like you're in a Bills fan.
Oh man, that's true.
So, all right. Anyway, Kyle.
Man, listen. This would have been perfect to know as UCF lowering the boom, if you will. And making their presence felt against the giant killer that is Boise State, being themselves the giants in question now that they're a Power 5 team. But instead, there's going to be a cloud on it. And until we figure out how bad Plumlee's injury is or isn't, it's going to be hard to determine which. So, I'll leave it at that. I wouldn't expect any answers until any of that really on Saturday. So, we're in Florida. We're used to storms. This one's going to have a cloud on until that gets resolved. And then down the line, if everything goes well, maybe it will be known as when UCF lowered the boom. But until such time.
Well, I know people have called this an ugly win, but if we're gonna treat games like we do people, I think this game is not. If you want to say this game is an ugly game, it's not a 2. It's more like a 5. You know what I mean? It's not an absolute like just awful game to look at. But because John Rice Plumlee, the defense, Colton Boomer, like I would argue that they did a lot of good tonight. And aside from the red zone, they moved the ball very well. There is an excitement about this offense, especially because John Rice Plumlee looks so good passing the ball. I mean, if John Rice Plumlee, if some JRP critics didn't convert last week, they probably did this week. I saw some people saying, like, I've been a JRP critic, but he did everything that he could do tonight. And he really did. The only thing he really didn't do was protect himself. And we ended up getting where we're at. And of course, that is going to cast a little bit of a cloud on this game, but there's still a little bit of a jury still out element on this.
I was about to say, you are at risk if let's put it this way, it gets announced John Rice Plumlee's out for the year. This is a freezing cold take by you.
You're right. I'll put myself out there. I'll put myself out there on that one. But I think that's going to end up being affecting a lot of stuff. But even if John Rice Plumlee is forced to miss time, I think this game is going to be more remembered for what you see for like it's what it should have been. But in the end, I still think that there was a lot of good to come out of it. The good just didn't turn into points. That I really think is kind of the best thing that you can really say about this game. It was a good game, but the score doesn't really tell otherwise because we just kind of had bad moments sometimes, and those end up happening. Then again, you can also chalk it up to just it's Boise State. It's always close. It's happened on 3 different color fields. So I mean, what else is there new to it? But anyway, I think we've been going now for about 2 hours, so I think it's about time we wrap this up because now UCF has to get ready to come back home from Boise, Idaho to play Villanova in their final non-conference game before things get started in the Big 12 conference proper, where they play on ESPN Plus at 6:30 p.m. on Saturday, September 16th. Finally, we are free from the ugly FS1 scoreboard. Now that, my friends, is a 1-2 to look at right there.
Oh my goodness.
But now we'll be able to look at the familiar and familiar ESPN Plus icon scorebugs scorebugs. So be sure to be ready accordingly for that. Thank you so much to everybody who has been here with us and listening or watching us talk about this game. And Kyle, Nick, thank you guys so much for coming on. And yeah, for Nick, you can follow Nick at Nick Porcelli 2 on Twitter. Kyle Nash at the SOTG for the student of the game. You can also follow Eric at Eric Lopez Elo, and be sure to follow the rest of the crew of the Black and Gold Banneret. We are at UCF Banneret _SBN on Twitter. You can follow Jeff Sharon at Jeff _Sharon. You can also follow Andrew Glukov at StatBoyDrew. And of course, a big thanks to all of our photographers as well. They're on Twitter as well. Twitter as well. So, and you can follow me at it's Bryson Turner on Twitter. Kyle, I think we just have one last thing to do before we sign off tonight.
It was an honor, joy, and privilege, gentlemen. But until then, class dismissed.
There we go. It just feels wrong to end a stream without doing that. Good luck writing your night class tonight. By the way, that's gonna get published. When are you aiming to get that out?
Probably tomorrow morning. Yes.
All right.
I gotta get that out there before I get to work and start pre-writing for the Jaguar report. So here we go.
Got it. So be on the lookout. For night class. And if you're hearing this in the far, far future, then check out the blackandgoldbanneret.com where it already would be published if you're listening to this later in the week. So there you go. So for Eric, for Nick, for Kyle, I am Bryson Turner. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Have a safe week, and we'll see you next week as the Knights take on Villanova. Go Knights, charge on.